Hey everyone, back again with another video here. And today we're going to be doing something a little bit different than normal. If you look behind me here, I'm on a little hike down here in South Florida. Ashley and I have made it down here. If you've been following us, we just crossed the whole country in my dad's RV. And today we're going to be talking about a little project we had along the way. So as you know, we were in Quartzsite, Arizona, all the way on the other side of the country for a little while. And while we were there, something my dad has been wanting to do for a long time is put solar in his RV. And I have minimal experience with that, but I like to think I know what I'm doing. So while we were at the show, we bought all our parts there and we installed solar on his RV. Actually, pretty much everything we bought was at the Quartzsite Big Tent RV show. We got the solar panels at one booth. We got 4 210 watt Newpowa solar panels. Got solar charge controller at another booth there. It was a Victron 100 volt 50 amp charge controller, MPPT, and it's a smart charge controller with the Bluetooth. We got some other elements for a lithium battery conversion also, because not only did we do solar, we upgraded all his house batteries to lithium. While we were there, we met Jason from Lifeline Lithium batteries, or Lifeline batteries. They do all sorts of batteries. I think they were most well known for their AGMs, and they're just coming into the lithium game here. So we gave their lithium batteries a try. We got 3 100 amp hour 12 volt lithium batteries for a total of 300 amp hours of lithium power. It's going to be a really cool setup. And pretty much every single component of the solar was bought in Quartzsite, mostly at the RV show. I think we might have picked up a couple little parts from a solar store in town there. But it's a super cool system. If you followed us for a while, you know on our RV we had a 300 watt solar system, and this one we're putting on his RV is kind of the system I wish we always had. It's a pretty nice one. It's all Bluetooth controlled. I'll show you a little more of that. So before we get started on the actual install, I'm going to go over with you what all parts we used, and I'm going to split it up into kind of 2 categories here. First, the parts for just the solar, and then second, everything to do the lithium conversion. So on the second list I'm going to tell you here, you wouldn't need any of that if you weren't switching to lithium. You could just connect right into your existing house batteries. So first of all, for the solar, we got 4 solar panels. They're 210 watt Newpowa solar panels. And then we got the panel mounting bracket kit to be able to mount them to the roof. We got the charge controller I mentioned before, the Victron MPPT 150 charge controller. We got a 50-foot wiring kit to be able to run power down from the roof down towards where the batteries are, and also and they had the MC4 connectors on them. We got 2 T connectors also with the MC4 connectors to split it off. We got a breaker box to hold 4 circuit breakers to put on the positive wires of every aspect of the system. And also we got some Dicor self-leveling sealant to help hold it down and waterproof it to the roof. And then next up, these are the things you'll only need for the lithium conversion. First off, lithium batteries. We got 3 100 amp hour Lifeline lithium batteries. Then we got something called a DC to DC charge controller, which we'll talk a little more about later. But basically it's just so that your alternator will charge the batteries while the RV is running. We got a converter to swap out the one that came with the RV. This converter is compatible with lithium batteries. It just charges at a slightly higher voltage. We'll talk a little more about that later also. And then just some extra wires for everything else in the system, linking all the batteries together since we were adding a couple more than were in there before. And I believe that's going to be all the parts we used. If I forgot anything, feel free to mention it down below, but I think I got it all. So now let's get on into the install. All right, so the first step in the install is to install the mounting brackets onto the solar panels. And for this, it just takes a single nut and bolt. It comes with the mounting brackets in a kit, and then we'll talk about it later on. There's also 2 self-tapper screws that are used to mount the panels to the roof. But for now, we're just using 1 nut and bolt to attach each bracket to the panel. Once that's all done and the panels are ready to go, next step is to move all the panels up onto the roof. They're not very heavy, but they are large and quite awkward to handle, so definitely recommend more than one person. You can see here how we did it with multiple people, and it worked out pretty well this way. Once they were all up on the roof, we then planned the layout of the panels, shuffled them all around, and this will be different for every RV. You can see for us, we ended up picking the back driver's side corner. Seemed like it'd be the best option to take up as little roof space as possible and still leave a nice walking path to get all around.
Oh my god!
And then we had a little bit of an unexpected distraction while planning the layout, and we actually saw an RV on fire over on the highway. It looked like it was a newer Class A, one of the ones with like the curved fronts. I think some of them might say Vegas on the front. Not sure exactly, but yeah, that was unfortunate for whoever that happened to. Well, once the fire distraction was over, got the panel layout all figured out, and real quick we'll take a look at the bottom of the panels since we didn't mention it too much before. You can see that the brand is Newpowa, which I had actually never heard of, but we saw they had a stand at the Quartzsite RV show, so they had pretty good deals and some good looking panels, 210 watt monocrystalline. You could look up the specific model number on the back if you wanted some more information on them, but they seemed like good panels and figured they'd work for what we were using them for, and we went with 4 of them for a total of 840 watts. Next, we'll talk about how the panels are going to be wired. I'm no pro, so I'm going to go real simple on this. Basically, there's in parallel, which is connecting all the positives to positives and all the negatives to the other negatives, and then there's in series, where you connect the positive on one panel to the negative of the other panel, and so forth. We ended up going with a combination of the two, so we get a little bit of the pros and a little bit of the cons of each one, or basically just all the pros. So I would definitely recommend this method if you just happen to have a setup with 4 panels. So you could see here, I show the positive and the negative wires coming off each panel, red for positive, black for negative, and then the blue lines represent where the wires are all linked together. So you can see the blue lines connecting panel to panel, and then the blue T connectors ultimately combining. So basically we have 2 sets each in series, and then each set that's in series is then paralleled together. So we got a little combination of parallel and series. So once all the wiring for the solar panels was figured out and we got the layout of the panels figured out, we marked on the roof with a pencil around the brackets. We just traced around it so we'd know where they were going. And then we moved the panels off, and now is where we used our Dicor self-leveling lap sealant. So we moved the panels, laid a very generous layer of it down in the space that we outlined, and then rested the panels right over the top of it to make a completely waterproof seal. And then through that, we put the self-tapping screws down into the roof. And then once that was all in and the panels were all in place and secured, we added another layer of Dicor on top of all the self-tapper screws going in. So we had a completely waterproof seal. Once all the panels were installed, we had to route the wire down from the panels into the RV, down to where the batteries and all the new equipment like charge controller and the DC to DC charger was going to be located. And in our case, there was a 3-way fridge in the RV, and one of the vents for the fridge was on the roof, so we were able to just go right through the vent. I'll show you a picture of it here. So we dropped down and ran these solar wires right along the side of the fridge. If you do go near a fridge, make sure you keep the wires away from the hot parts of the fridge. Just keep that in mind. So we ran it along the side of the fridge, and then it worked out very conveniently to drop right into the battery compartment and where all the equipment was going to go, which is right below the fridge in this RV. So worked out perfectly. We only used about a 20-foot run of wire. Once the wires from the panels were all down there and in place, the next step was the batteries. So first we moved out the old ones. The batteries that were in there before were basically just the cheapest lead acid deep cycle batteries you can get. Nothing special at all, and they were getting old and could use replacing anyway. And what we decided to go with for batteries were, I believe, a new selection of batteries, which are Lifeline Lithium batteries. Now, Lifeline's been around for a while, but I believe their lithium line is pretty new. So we met Jason, who was the representative for Lifeline at the Quartzsite RV show, and he was really awesome, set us up with a great deal on 3 of his 100 amp hour batteries. So we ended up going with a total of 300 amp hours of lithium, and these batteries are really cool. They've got a built-in Bluetooth for each individual battery, so we can look at each battery on your phone individually. We'll get into that a little more later. And also they've all got built-in battery monitoring systems. So the battery monitoring system basically is just the battery protecting itself. So it won't let itself charge when the temperatures are too cold, and it won't let in too much of a charge, or it basically just protects itself so you don't have to worry about it. And again, we'll dive more into that Bluetooth later. Oh, and for the wiring of the batteries, it's gonna be different for every RV, but basically they're wired in parallel, positive to positive, negative to negative, between all the batteries. Next, we'll move into the compartment next to the batteries where all the fun really happens in this system. So unfortunately, when I did most of the work on this, it was in the dark and I was working with a headlamp, so I really didn't get the best footage of it, but I will give a good description of exactly what was done here, and I drew a little diagram that I will show you also. So first thing we'll talk about is the Victron DC to DC charge controller. This is the 121230 model of it, and it's also the smart version, which has built-in Bluetooth. So we'll get more into the Bluetooth later, just like the batteries. And this is one of the pieces of equipment that's only needed if you're converting to lithium batteries. If you're just adding solar to your existing battery bank, this isn't going to be needed. Basically, it converts the power from the alternator coming into the house batteries to be a higher voltage so that when your engine is running, you'll be charging your lithiums. If we didn't switch this out, the lithium batteries might not charge properly while the engine was running. Next, real quick, I'll mention the converter. Show you a picture of it here. This is actually not wired in with the DC to DC or the solar system, but this is another piece that's needed if you're converting to lithium. Basically, what the converter does is converts shore power, 110 volt, down to 12 volt to charge your batteries and run all your 12 volt appliances in the RV. And since you're converting to lithium, they require a slightly higher voltage to charge, so it's basically the same thing as the converter that was in there. It just operates at a little bit of a higher voltage, so we swapped that out also. All right, so next piece of equipment, right above the DC to DC charge controller, and actually the piece that looks the same, the other blue chunk right above it, is the MPPT solar charge controller. This is the Victron MPPT 150 model of their solar charge controller, and what this does is it converts the power from the solar panels down to a good current to charge the house batteries. And we'll get a little more into the wiring of this in just a second. But I will mention that this also has its own Bluetooth, just like the DC to DC and the batteries. We'll dive into all that at the end of the video to show you how it all looks on your phone. And right next to the two pieces of Victron equipment, you'll see a breaker box, and I'm not going to get too much into the wiring of this, but basically there's just a circuit breaker added onto the positive run of every wire. So you'll see that more in the diagram later. I'm not actually going to show the breakers, but on every long red wire that you see running, there's a breaker wired into the middle of it, just for safety and to be able to shut the system off if ever needed, and it's all labeled there. Alright, so here's a very simplified breakdown of the wiring for the whole system. And again, I don't show the breakers, but there's one on every positive run of wire. So in the top left is the solar panels, and a positive and negative wire from the panels runs down to the solar charge controller and goes into the side of it that says PV. So 2 wires coming in from the solar panels, and then 2 wires are coming out of the solar charge controller, which run to the positive and negative terminals on the house batteries to charge them. Next is the DC to DC charger, and this is a pretty simple one. Basically, it just connects the starter battery to the house batteries. So there's a positive and negative wire running from the starter battery to the DC to DC charger, and then another set of positive and negative wires running from the DC to DC charger to the house batteries. And the DC to DC turns on automatically when it senses that the starter battery voltage is going up. It senses that the engine is running. So then it allows a charge to come through and charge the house batteries, and then the charger automatically turns off to stop charging once the engine turns off. That way, your starter battery won't get drained with the house batteries when the engine isn't running. So it basically takes care of itself. It's a really cool piece of equipment. And again, it's only needed if you're converting to lithium. And that was just a quick and easy description of the wiring. Of course, there's more in depth, and do your research, read the manuals, and make sure you get yours wired up properly. But yeah, that was just a quick and dirty description. Next, like I promised, I'll give you a look at how all the Bluetooth compatibility works, because we've got a lot of it here. So in this system, we've got 2 apps. First, we'll look at the app that'll show the Bluetooth connection for all 3 batteries. That's going to be the one on the left here that says Smart Bat. That's the name of the app. It's a pretty simple one, but it gives you all the information that you need. So if we open it up here, we see we can select each battery. In this case, we've got 3 batteries. You can see we've got numbers 56, 18, and 33. And then when you open it up, you can see some information. Top left gauge, you can see how much charge is going in or out. Right now, you can see the battery is discharging at a rate of 3.9 amps. You can see the voltage with the gauge on the right, sitting at 13.2, which is right where it's supposed to be. And you can see the state of charge right in the middle of the screen. This battery is at 99%. Right now the sun is down, so it's not charging. That's why the battery's discharging, and you can see we just dropped down to 99%. And also you can see cycle number 4. That's just how many cycles of charge the batteries have gone through. These only have 4 because they're basically brand new batteries. And of course, you can see all of this information for each battery individually. Very cool that they all have their own Bluetooth. Next, the other app we use is the Victron Connect app, and this is the same app for the DC to DC charge controller and the solar charge controller, since they are both Victron. So we'll go into the app. You can see our 2 pieces of equipment there, the ouRVan Smart DC to DC charge controller on top, and the Smart Solar MPPT solar charge controller is the second one. First, we'll look at the DC to DC. This is a really basic one. There's not that much to look at here. You can see the engine's not running right now, so it shows off, and you can see the voltage of the starter battery. And if we turned on the engine, you'd see that flip. It would say on. You would see an output voltage show up, because there would be a charge going from the starter battery into the house batteries. Right now it's off, so you don't see that. And I believe it would also say the state of charge. Usually says bulk, because if the batteries are drained, bulk just means it's given basically a full charge at all its ability. Next, we'll look at the solar charge controller. If you open it up here, you see up top, it says 0 watts right now. That's going to show how much sun is actually coming in through your panels at any given moment. So right now we've got 0 watts because the sun is down, but during the day you'll see it go anywhere from 200 watts if it's cloudy all the way up to into the 700s when it's sunny out, and that's what we get off our 840 watt system. And you can see the information, the voltage and the amount of amps coming in from the solar. And then in the second section where it says battery, you can see the battery voltage. Current is how much charge is coming into the batteries, and then the state of charge. It'll either say bulk, float, or just what type of charge you're getting. I'm not going to get too much into detail there. You could also go over to the history screen and see what kind of power you've been bringing in the past. You can see we've had this set up for about a week now. And let's see, the highest watts we've ever seen off our panels is 729. And, you know, we haven't really given these a full test yet, just basics so far, but it's been working really, really well. And that's about it for the Bluetooth compatibility on this system. As you can see, it's a lot of information between the DC to DC, the charge controller, and all 3 batteries. We've got 5 separate ways we could look at Bluetooth information on this system. So that's really cool that you can just pull out your phone and see everything you could possibly want to know about your batteries and the solar. And that is going to be it for the solar install. So what we put in was 840 watts of Newpowa solar panels wired in parallel and series, coming down into a battery bank of 300 amp hours of Lifeline Lithium batteries. Should be a great system. We've gotten to use it for a few days now. I've had some experience watching it. Seems to work perfectly. The Bluetooth connectivity of everything has been awesome. It's so nice to be able to look at all the information on your phone from the batteries and the charge controller and the DC to DC. You just open up an app on your phone, make sure everything is working exactly how you want it to. It's an awesome system. If I forgot to mention anything, feel free to throw any questions you might have in the comments down below. And also, if you see anything I might have messed up, please tell me so I can get that fixed as soon as possible. If you've been watching us for a while, you might be waiting to hear what we're gonna do next. Don't worry, that information will be coming in the next video. It's gonna be a fun one, and see you next time.